Well, he definitely traveled through time. See where he ended up. Well, this place is still abandoned. Looks like, anyway. Let's get ourselves up to the surface, see what happened.
Beyond all hope and against all probability, it seemed that the device had unerringly delivered me to the era I sought. For these were Sarafan banners, and these vampires apparently the victims of their crusade. The coincidence seemed too convenient to naively ascribe to fate. But whether my opportune arrival had been orchestrated by Mobius or some other influence, I didn't know. If Janos Audrin still lived, I would find him. But I was wary of further deception, and resolved to tread carefully.
Okay, it seems as though Raziel at least believes that he's been transported back in time far enough to the point in which Janos Audrin is still alive, the legendary vampire, which we've heard about a number of times. I don't know why he insisted on just using the damn time streaming chamber on his own, obviously admitting that he didn't know how to work the machine, when at least, I mean, Kain probably could have facilitated that a little bit. Kain obviously knew how to work the machine, or else he wouldn't have used it at the end of Solar Reaver. And Kain at least seems to have some interest in Raziel completing his mission here, or doing what he plans on doing. But anyway, I mean, Raziel has appeared to at least have arrived back in time. This is several hundred years in the past. And this is a time before or during the original Sarafan War. So at this point, this was the... hold on.
For all the butchery of Mobius's crusade, this massacre was somehow more chilling. The killing fields of the Sarafan betrayed a kind of orderly ruthlessness, the cold-blooded righteousness of the true believer.
We've been transported back in time to a point when people like not only Vordor and Alauis was still alive, and Janos Audrin is still alive, but also, like, this is the time before the original form, Raziel's human form, had been killed. And this is the time back when Malik was still human, and all that kind of stuff. And before Vordor eventually it's not sacrificed, but slaughtered the various members of the Circle of the Pillars of Nosgoth. So, he's way back in time. And this is round about the time that Kain went and... hold on.
By all that is holy!
Here at last, in the flesh, I beheld my former brothers in arms, the warrior priests of the Sarafan Order, their lives devoted solely to the annihilation of the vampire plague. And while I confess, I felt a twinge of longing, a pang of grief for what I had believed was my lost virtue, I regarded them now with none of the reverence I formerly felt. For I had seen the human face of the vampires, and now I beheld the monstrousness of these men.
So this is the time during the first Sarafan War against the vampires, led by Malik and sort of justified by the Circle of the Pillars of Nosgoth. This, hundreds of years before the time of Kain or the Nemesis or William the Just, and during a time when Malik was still human and all that kind of stuff I just mentioned. Oh shit! And during this time, this was back when... oh wow, it's a nice sword I just picked up. Now, Raziel's known for quite some time, since midway through the first Soul Reaver, that he was originally one of the Sarafan Knights, one of the high-ranking Sarafan lieutenants under Malik. And he, for quite some time, held the Sarafan up to some high moral standing, like they were righteous, holy people that were doing their duty and destroying the unholy, unnatural vampire menace. Raziel's come to now see things a little bit different. While I don't know whether he still sees vampires to be a completely evil, unholy thing, or if he's just started to see everybody in rather shades of gray rather than the black and white way that he'd seen everything before. He now sees the Sarafan for exactly what they were, a vengeful, genocidal group of people. I've always believed, as I mentioned back in Soul Reaver in the first Blood Omen, that the vampires weren't intrinsically evil by their nature. Just because they were vampires doesn't mean that they were immediately evil, and that was something that I always had a problem with in vampire fiction. I never liked the idea that as soon as a person turned into a vampire, they instantly turned into this evil monster. It just didn't seem natural to me. Not that the concept of a vampire is natural anyway, but I mean, you understand what I mean. How can a person be motivated to instantly turn evil just by turning into a vampire? Even if they did have to survive, feed off the blood of humans, which they don't really have to in this world. It always seemed kind of weird, and I would say that vampires aren't necessarily immediately evil in the Legacy of Kain universe. So, Raziel witnessing, did I just double back? I think I did. Yeah, I did. Kain's beginning to see things differently now. Or, not Kain, Raziel's beginning to see things differently. The vampires that he's been seeing slaughtered back in the first time zone that he warped into in the beginning of this game, as well as now, aren't monstrous things. They are in fact very human looking, and in fact probably hold a lot of their former human characteristics. And they're just being slaughtered on account of being different than everybody else. Damn it, stop running around like an idiot. Go somewhere. Yeah, I'll get right on that. Oh yeah, here I am. Haha. Gotta kill these guys. Now, I don't know if this is just sort of like a realization that we're having that Raziel is an extremely fickle individual and is willing to flip-flop on his convictions at the drop of a hat, because he's really gone through this kind of moral change multiple times since during his entire existence. See, originally he was a Sarafan, so he was a human who felt at least morally justified in the slaughter of the vampires. Then, through admittedly no act of his own, he was killed and then resurrected by Kain to be a vampire, someone who despises humans as opposed to vampires. Now, can't really blame him for that, because he wasn't really Whoa, fell right into that snow, didn't he? Can't really blame him for that, because Kain was responsible for him changing his mind on that. He didn't even remember being a Sarafan. Then, once he died, he still had this sort of reverence for the vampire form. Then when he realized he was used to be a Sarafan, suddenly he's like, oh, I was human once, and I was Sarafan once. Those are the people I should have been. Now he's changing his mind again. I mean, is he really just screwy, or what?
After my long journey, I finally stood on the threshold of enlightenment. For here was Janos Audrin's mountain retreat, intact and unblemished. The upheaval that would one day topple this ancient edifice had not yet occurred. And while I had no certainty that Janos still lived, this scene boded well, for I presumed that the collapse of the retreat must have followed the ancient vampire's demise. There was only one obstacle: how to reach the balcony suspended at that maddening height, so far beyond my reach. For this was the architecture of winged creatures. The tattered ruins of my wings were of no use. I would need to devise some other means into that mountain.